The Yugoslav tech tree as part of War Thunder has been discussed by players even as early as the implementation of Italy as a separate tech tree in War Thunder. And this is certainly based on good foundation. Even before the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia was formed, the Kingdom of Yugoslavia had ventures into specific tank designs during the buildup of their armies, such as the Skoda 1D or the T-32, Skoda 1J, and the Skoda 2J or T12 prototypes. Unfortunately, these orders would not flourish and war would break out before Yugoslavia could form a solid armored military. During the war, Yugoslav partisans would align themselves with the Allies while the newly formed independent state of Croatia would align themselves with the Axis powers. This led them to using their side's equipment respectively. After the war, when Croatia was absorbed into the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, the integrated army, now known as the Yugoslavia Narodna Armia, utilized American equipment initially owing to the Tito-Stalin split, and as the Khrushchev thaw warmed the relations with Yugoslavia, the Soviets became the primary arms suppliers to Yugoslavia until the end of the Republic at the Wars of Independence. Today, let's take a look at the possible vehicles of the Yugoslav Ground Forces tech tree. In the next video, we will take a look at aircraft. So for now, let's have tanks. Disclaimer, I personally believe Yugoslav tanks should start at rank 4 like Israel, but for the sake of writing in a full tree, and because Yugoslavia does have interesting designs at low tiers, I will start at rank 1. This would be a stripped down version different from the ones in the forums. I've removed some of the dodgy, less plausible additions, and just something you'll see on launch. Nevertheless, I've put a link to the forum post below because it did help me fill a lot of blanks as to information regarding certain vehicles. Another disclaimer, when I say Yugoslav line or foreign line, I may sometimes refer to the literal tech tree line or a column in the tech tree, but with vehicles like SPGs and SPAAs, I just mean to indicate where they originate rather than where they are supposed to be. For rank 1, Yugoslavia's Skoda tanks have an issue. They're basically tankettes, so they are essentially a casemate which is unconventional to be added as a reserve vehicle. Except when it comes to the S2J T12 prototype. So if you'll allow me, it would be possible to have the Skoda 1D and Skoda 1J in the tank destroyer line as researchables at 1.0 rather than reserve vehicles. The reserve vehicles for Yugoslavia would be represented by the Hotchkiss H35 for the foreign line, which would be a mix of Axis vehicles delivered to the Croatians and Allied vehicles used by the Yugoslav partisans in the subsequent Socialist Federal Republic, and for the Yugoslav designed line, we could start with the T12. The foreign vehicles would be the M8 Greyhound, Panzer IIF, Renault R35, M3 Stuart, the SD KFZ-10/4, the AB-41, and the M1542 Premium with a Panzer 38 turret that was used by the Ustaše during some time in World War II. For rank 2, the Yugoslav line is represented by the Samoa S35 with the 6-pounder gun. This should definitely be premium, but for lack of the representation for the Yugoslav tank line, this would do well. But another good possibility would be the M3 Stuart fitted with a PaK-40 anti-tank gun in the style of the Okia 3.7 Ram in the British tech tree. There's also the M3 Stuart modified to carry a howitzer, but unlike the PaK-40 Stuarts, there are no photographs of this tank. Only an illustration made by Tank Encyclopedia. What is real, however, is the M3 Stuart that was modified to use the Flak Via Link Quad 20mm. That would be a good SPAA for Yugoslavia. For the foreign line, there's the base M3A3 Stuart, the Daimler AEC Mark II armored car, and the Stug 3 and Panzer III. And subsequently, there's also the T-34-76 and the Su-76 used in the post-war by the JNA. For rank 3, the Yugoslav line is represented by the M634 tank. This is a modification by Yugoslavia on the M4 Sherman. In this case, it was an M4A3 refitted with the T-34's engine. After that is the SO-122, probably the most popular Yugoslavian modification ever, which was an M4A3 modified to fire the Soviet 122mm A-19 howitzer using the same shells as the IS-2. For the foreign lines, there's the M4A3 with the 75mm gun, the M4A3 EC8 HVSS, M36 Jackson, M18 Hellcat, Jagdpanzer 30 AT, PT-76, and the T-34-85. An interesting premium would be the Type A tank or Tank Type A, a T-34-85 built in Yugoslavia. Because of the difficulties in production, only 5 were made. It was essentially the same as the T-34-85 but had a different turret design and a redesigned muzzle brake for the ZIS-53 gun. For SPAA, the M15 CGMC would be the candidate. There also could be the Bosnian Hellcat for this BR, but I don't think not that Bosnian Hellcat with a T-55 hull. That's for rank 4. But the Bosnian camouflage Hellcat for rank 3. At rank 4, the Yugoslav line has the M320, a single prototype tank designed by Yugoslavia in the post-war. It was made to be the tank that unified the parts of all the tanks Yugoslavia had at that time: the T-34, M4 Sherman, M47 Patton, and M36 Jackson. This can be supplanted by the T-54 hull M18 turret combination from Bosnia and the OT M60PB with two 82mm recoilless rifles. For the foreign line, there's the M36B2 with a locally developed shell such as the M74 heat round and M67 high explosive round. Along with this, the ISU-152 and SU-100 would go in the foreign line. The SPAA is a BOV-3, a triple-mounted 20mm on a wheeled APC. Along with the BOV-3, there was also the Czech M53-59 Praga. I think it was the Mod 70 that they used, but they used a mix of M53-59 and M53-59-70 Pragas. For rank 5, the Yugoslav line gets two indigenous designs, the M636 Condor and the M636D. One of each were made and were fitted with either the 85mm of the T-34-85 or the 90mm of the M47. Although which actually made it onto the prototypes is not clear because information on these vehicles are scarce. This tanks can be followed by the M80A, a Yugoslav IFV pattern similarly to the BMP, but was fitted with a 20mm HSS cannon and two 9M14 Malyutka M Plus missiles, the one that the BMP-1 uses before the upgrade. And along with this is the M80A LT variant with 6 Malyutka launchers in replacement for the 20mm gun. Foreign tanks will include the M47 Patton, the T-54, the AMX-30B donated by the UAE to Bosnia, though I think depending on the shells it might be rank 6. The SPA would be the SPA-T30/2 or the M80A IFV with two 30mm cannons in a Foka turret, looking similar to the Falcon, and along with that is the ZSU 57-2. For rank 6, the start of the Yugoslav line would be the T-55 AI Igman. Upgrading the T-55s using parts used on the M84, it received a night sight, laser rangefinder, and two rails for Malyutka missiles. This can be followed by the Slovenian M55S, which was an upgraded T-55 with ERA, laser rangefinder, laser warning receiver, external smoke dischargers, and newer night sights, though not thermal imagers. Followed by this, or I think this would go before it, is the T-55H, the Serbian take on T-55 modernization. It's the same as the M55S, but the ERA is different. There are no laser warning receivers, and possibly a T-72 style self-entrenching dozer. Then the M84 follows, essentially based off the T-72M but is not interchangeable, using 60% different parts, and had a more powerful 1000 horsepower engine and a better fire control system. Immediately after this is the M84A4 Sniper, the Slovenian and Croatian upgrade to the M84 and the M91 Vihor. The M91 Vihor follows the M84A4, which was an upgrade focusing on firepower. The M80AB1 IFV also follows the Yugoslav line with newer variants of the Malyutka missiles, including tandem charge variants. The foreign tanks for Yugoslavia would be the T-55, T-72M, and the Bosnian M60A3s. The SPAA would be the Sava M90, which would be the Strela 10 M2 on the BVP-80 hull. The rank 6 premium should be the M84D. A side grade to the M84A4 with the same upgrades as the M95 Digman. For rank 7, there are no more foreign tanks, hence it will be filled with upgrades to the M84, such as the M84AS1 and the even newer M84AS2 and the M95 Degman, a Croatian upgrade to the M91 Vihor with ERA, thermal imagers, and newer shells. The SPAA is the Pashar 16 with a 40mm Bofors gun with 2 infrared missiles, either the Mistral, Iglas, Strela, or the RLN-1C, which is a modified R13M missile with a sustainer motor and wider rocket motor to facilitate ground-to-air use. Of course, as time passes by and more data become available, the sector becomes supplanted by even more vehicles, or take Israeli's route and slowly march into stagnancy as time passes by. Regardless, Yugoslavia is an interesting nation to see in War Thunder, considering they were one of the biggest armies in Europe during the Cold War and supplied other nations with their vehicles as well. Kuwait being one of the biggest receivers of Yugoslav tanks. Again, thank you for watching. In the next video, we'll take a look at the Yugoslav air tree. Cheers!